Let's get more insight into the bilateral ties between China and Malaysia. And for that, we're joined by Ravi Ramamurti. He's a professor and director for the Center for Emerging Markets at Northeastern University. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, sure, Michelle.
Ravi, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has been in Beijing holding high-level talks with Premier Lee Keqiang, and agreements have been signed on railways, energy, defense, also joint development of Malaysia's naval ships. What would you say has been the most significant development here?
I think the most significant development from China's perspective is that Malaysia, much like Philippines before it, is reconciled to the view that the dispute over the islands should be resolved by direct talks. I think from China's perspective, that is probably the most important development as a result of these visits. From Malaysia's perspective, I think what China is doing is helping to revive growth in the economy. It has been slowing a little bit. It was from 5% or so last year to more like 4%. And the infusion of Chinese money and technology and some very large, ambitious infrastructure projects like the rail link you referred to, going from the north to the south, all the way from Thailand to Singapore, will contribute to faster growth of the Malaysian economy.
All right, you mentioned those rail links. Ravi, what other sectors or industries do you see benefiting in Malaysia, and which ones do you see benefiting in China?
Well, the Chinese benefit rises directly from the large infrastructure projects. China has excess capacity in many of those industries, whether you're talking about transport equipment, steel, cement, and so on, all of which will be used in these mega projects. For the Malaysians, the building of the infrastructure, I think, is a very vital contribution to overall development, because when you build a major infrastructure project like a rail link, you open up growth in the hinterland in all parts of the country. So that's very valuable from Malaysia's perspective. But also important, I think, is the fact that China is making it easier for Chinese tourists to go to Malaysia. And the Chinese like to travel, and they go to lots of places and spend a lot of money, and Malaysia will benefit from having more tourists coming into the country.
Well, how is Malaysia strategically positioned to benefit from the Belt and Road Initiative?
Oh, it's very much a critical part of the link that China hopes to create, connecting China with the other parts of the world, which are particularly important to the Chinese economy. So a line that goes across Indochina and through Malaysia and Singapore opens up possibilities to then link with the maritime. So the One Belt, One Road project, Malaysia takes a very important role in that scheme.
Well, Ravi, China and Malaysia have now signed business deals worth around 144 billion RMB. That's about 21 billion US dollars. And Malaysia's Prime Minister has now come under fire, and he's dismissed claims that Malaysia was being sold off to China, that they're selling out. What do you make of that whole controversy and his reaction?
Well, I mean, his reaction is what you would expect. You would not expect him to accept the premise of those charges. But there is no question that as China becomes a more active foreign investor, not just a trading partner, which it already has been for Malaysia, the #1 trading partner for a number of years, it is now also becoming the #1 source of foreign direct investment. And that is creating, understandably, some anxiety within Malaysia, because Malaysia is still a $300 billion economy, and China is much, much bigger, and there are internal tensions between the Malaysians of Chinese origin and other groups within Malaysia. So any appearance of huge Chinese influence in the Malaysian economy is bound to create some concerns.
But there is influence, one could say, by virtue of these massive capital injections. And do these deals and increasing naval cooperation efforts in the South China Sea now point to growing Chinese influence and perhaps waning US influence?
There is no question that Chinese influence in the region is increasing. It's funny, we've talked about the US pivoting towards Asia. In many ways, China was preoccupied with Africa and Latin America when it was concerned with getting enough raw materials to power its economy. Today, you could say China is also pivoting towards Asia and really paying much closer attention to relationships with its neighbors. And it's discovering, I think, that you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. And these deals in which China provides substantial funding and also doesn't ask too many questions about the internal politics and affairs of the countries receiving its aid is much more attractive to these countries than the traditional US approach.
You make some interesting points there. Thank you so much. Ravi Ramamurti, Professor and Director for the Center for Emerging Markets at Northeastern University.